You're listening to the Scaling Culture podcast, where we sit down with thought leaders who share their experiences building incredible workplace cultures. Our guest today is Joey Coleman. He helps companies keep their customers and employees. As an award-winning speaker, he shares his first 100 days methodology for improving customer and employee retention with organizations around the world, such as Whirlpool, Volkswagen Australia, and Zappos. His two books have received critical acclaim, and both were instant Wall Street Journal bestsellers. Never Lose a Customer Again shows how to turn any sale into a lifelong customer, and his newest book, Never Lose an Employee Again, details a framework companies around the world can use to reduce turnover and increase employee engagement. In this episode of Scaling Culture, Ron and Joey discuss the importance of building advocates when onboarding new employees and some strategies to build strong connections from the outset. What is the scientifically proven hiring remorse phase, and why continuous communication during this period is critical? What is a personal operating manual, and why should everyone adopt one? And finally, why understanding the phases of the employee lifecycle leads to better retention and satisfaction in the workplace.
Welcome to another episode of the Scaling Culture podcast. I'm your host, Ron Lovett, and today we have Joey Coleman with us. Joey, how you doing, man?
Ron, I am doing very well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on the show. I've really been looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. You came very highly recommended from Christy Breed, who we, Christy Harold. Christy Breed's another friend of mine, who we had on the show, which was a fantastic episode. I don't even know if we've released that one yet. So I was excited to get to meet you. And look, I want to start with, so you've got a really interesting background, Secret Service, author, and your title. Actually, I want to start there. Because when I looked at it, I had to look at it 3 times. You know, I'm dyslexic, have ADHD, so I move fast and can sometimes create my own version of what I'm reading. And when I read Chief Experience Composer, I actually first read it. That was a mess with my brain. I was reading Chief Experience Officer. Tell me about that title, and maybe just for context, a little bit about Design Symphony.
So I started Design Symphony about 20 years ago. And when it originally started, it was a branding agency. I would design logos, brand identities, business cards, letterhead. I know I'm dating myself when I say things like letterhead in this day and age, but that was the business.
Joey, to clarify, at 45, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what a business card is.
I love it. I love it. I'm the old man on the call today. Thank you, Ron, for pointing that out to the audience. So that's where the business was. And it began to morph and evolve from a brand identity firm to a firm that did all things related to experience. And what I realized early on is that the one great differentiator that a business has in this day and age is the experience we create for our customers and our employees. Everybody's in a race to the bottom when it comes to price. Like, everybody's got their price dialed in to be the highest the market will bear, but not any higher than that, so that customers keep coming. Everybody's operating 24/7, 365. If not, your doors are open at that time. Your website's available at that time. People can message you. They can get information. Most businesses increasingly are looking to expand their regional, if not national, if not global footprint in terms of who they take care of. And everybody's expected to deliver a high quality product with 0 defects. So when we take the kind of ante up chips to sit down and play the game, all of those things kind of end up equal across all industries. What's left is how you make people feel. What's left is the experiences people have when they do business with you, when they interact with you. And so I fairly quickly came to realize, especially running a company called Design Symphony, which the idea was to get all the pieces of your business on the same sheet of music playing in harmony together.
Got it.
That my job was to serve as the composer. So the composer looks at all the instruments, says, what do I want the audience to feel when they listen to this piece of music? And then structures the notes to hit at certain timings, at certain intervals, bring in different instruments at different time. And so that's kind of what I see my job when I'm doing consulting for companies, as to come in and say, okay, you've already got your instruments. You've been playing the same sheet of music for a long time, but your audience may not be responding to the music the way you want them to. Are they dancing? Are they enjoying it? Are they telling their friends about it? And so the idea is that we come in and we help restructure and recompose the music to have the end result people are looking for.
Very interesting. And so you've got two books, Never Lose a Customer Again and Never Lose an Employee Again. So, the first was about the customer. And how did you segue? Was it like, wow, did you have this aha moment? Like, if we don't fix employees, they can't fix customers? Walk us through, from first to second book.
Well, I had been in the customer experience space for about all of 10 minutes before I realized you can't have a great customer experience without great employees to deliver that experience. The challenge that I faced at the time, and frankly is still a challenge today, is in most organizations, customer experience sits somewhere around account management, maybe marketing and sales. In many organizations, there's no one who's actually responsible for it. There's like 70 people that are involved with it. And it's like trying to figure out, all right, what is the external experience we're creating for our customers? Conversely, the internal experience for our employees or our team members is often a head of HR, is often a department that is very siloed from the rest of the organization. And while I certainly would have loved to write a book called Never Lose a Customer or an Employee Again, that makes for a really long title. The principles are
And a long book.
and a long, long book. Yeah. And I don't write short books, right? I wish I was smart enough to write short books. My books clock in at about 300 pages and on average about 15 to 20 pages of endnotes and footnotes and sources that we're citing. So when I looked at that, I realized I needed to bifurcate the two approaches. We needed to have a customer approach and an employee approach. Now, for anyone listening in, if you were to read either of the books and do a find and replace and swap out customer for employee or swap out employee for customer, the principles are exactly the same. And they outline, there are 8 phases to the journey that you want to pay attention to. You've got about 100 days to lay the foundation to a long-term relationship, whether you're talking about the interactions you're having with your external customers or your internal customers, which by default are your employees and the people on your team.
So it's interesting. When I first read the title of the book, of course, in my mind, I was like, well, I wonder if, and I didn't read the subtitle, and I'm excited to read your book, by the way, but was it Never Lose an Employee Again that performs well and lines up with your values that you don't want to lose?
Yeah,
I was like, right.
Totally. And here's the interesting thing. I intentionally did not call the book Never Lose an Employee. The book is called Never Lose an Employee Again. The book isn't called Keep All Your Employees.
Right.
Right. And the idea around the word lose is anyone who hasn't been in business for any appreciable amount of time has had the unbelievably frustrating and morale crushing experience of someone who is a really valued member of your team coming to you and saying, I'm giving my notice. I'm leaving. I'm quitting. I'm taking a job somewhere else, whatever it may be. And what I'm trying to do is create a framework in organizations within their culture where you're not surprised when someone's departing, because that's really what hurts our businesses. If we know someone's going to leave, if we plan for it, if we're aware of it, it's a lot easier to segue and transition out of that. And we may have, those listening in may have had the experience of a valued employee who's like, look, I'm moving on to another thing. We're moving to another location. I'm giving you 6 months notice. I want to train my replacement. I want to help you out. And as hard as it is for them to leave, and as hard as it is for us to have them leave, we can weather the storm,
right?
Because we've got time and we've got systems and we've got the ability to navigate. What I don't want to have happen is the one that shocks you.
Yeah, you don't want the carpet ripped
I'm out.
from beneath. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly.
And it's funny because and I've had, there's entrepreneurs are in such different parts of the life cycle or progressive or command and control, or, there's so many different cultures out there because it really is, an extension of the founder in a lot of cases, or founders. And of course, I probably have a quick bias, which I shouldn't, which is when someone's like, I don't have any turnover. Oh, we don't have a turnover. We have people, everyone's been here for 20 years. I'm like, your performance is just, you're not pushing people enough, or you're not expecting enough, or your company hasn't grown enough, or your people don't have big enough visions because for themselves. And so I question those things if someone's like, no one's ever left this place, right or wrong. I probably shouldn't.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I think the goal should not be 100% retention. And that may be counterintuitive from the guy who wrote a book called Never Lose an Employee Again, saying, yeah, no, I don't think that's what you do. Increasingly, I think the role model that business leaders should be looking to is top collegiate coaches.
Can you
sports.
explain that, collegiate coaches?
So if you think of like a collegiate coach for a hockey team, a basketball team, a football
what
team,
is
a
collegiate?
soccer team.
Is that a word for college?
At the college level.
Okay,
right?
okay.
At the college level, right? And the top colleges, especially, and I know many of our listeners are in Canada, some of them are in the US as well. In the US school system, you come out of high school, you go to college, and there's a huge amount of recruiting that is happening of those athletes to come play at the top collegiate levels. The reason I use this analogy is not because I'm a big sports analogy guy by any means, but because here's what I know about top college coaches. They know that they are recruiting the best of the best from a small pool. Not every high schooler is a world-class hockey player. In fact, there's probably just a handful at any school that are actually going to play at the next level. On top of that, when they recruit them, they know that at best, they're going to have that person for 5 or 6 years. And that's if we're counting medical red shirts and injuries and we get some little extensions of time we can play them. If the person is a top player, if they are top talent, you might only have them for 2 years, maybe 3. And if you're trying to build a dynastic championship team that wins year after year and performs year after year, as the coach, as the leader, you're having to move the players around because you have players leaving and players coming constantly. This even happens at the pro levels.
Yes.
So instead of coming into it, to your point, with this attitude of, well, I've got to hire someone who's going to be here 20 years later. No, you've got to get the right pieces to assemble the team, to run your playbook, to win games this season, and maybe win the championship next season, and then understand that the following season, a lot of your players are going to get poached to other teams and are going to be gone. And it's like, how do we think more intentionally and strategically about the compositions of our teams and quit thinking that, oh, well, we'll just have to sort it out because this is who we have for the next decade.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I also think that it's such a complex thing because it's also, one of our values is relentless improvement and ensuring that the team and the individuals grow along with the company. If your company's scaling, folks better be learning. They better be learning, or the company. I mean, I've had that happen a lot of times where the company has outgrown individuals. That's always my biggest fear is like, which it sucks, but it happens a lot. Or someone's skill set doesn't evolve for what the company needs. And by the way, huge look in the mirror moment for me.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
So true, Ron. I mean, this is the thing that I think many leaders miss. They're like, oh, our people aren't growing and developing enough. We don't have the right skill sets. I'm like, do you have the right skill sets?
That's right.
Because you're the leader. And if you're not growing and evolving and getting better, you can never expect your team to either have someone to model or that you're going to be ready to handle them and work with them once they've grown and evolved.
Yeah, 100%. And so, I know you've got a lot of philosophy on the first 100 days, but one thing I heard you mention previously in one of your talks, which I thought was interesting, maybe it's not the starting point. You can correct me if not, we can go somewhere else, but hiring remorse and because that does feel like early on the process. And it's funny, and I think we both, who Jack Daly is, the speaker.
I do.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
And, I was at a conference and Jack was speaking years ago, and he's like, all these companies, you guys, you think you're so smart, and you have these, he's so aggressive. You have these, celebratory, well-wishing retirement parties for people because they're leaving, and you should be having the welcome party, and you missed it. And I was like, oh man, I'm like, oopsie daisy, and so we really think about that. And we try to, and during the pandemic, we kind of shifted to let's flood someone's inbox. Like, so Joe, you show up day one and you get a flood of emails from like everybody saying, welcome, here's who I am. What do you need? Like, it's our version of coming to the office and everyone's saying, hey, it's actually probably a little less awkward. Tell what are the key attributes that create the remorse, which is a natural feeling anyways. You're going to feel it no matter what, but what are the things that can make it worse quickly? And what are your strategies? What are some of the best things you've done, heard, executed on the counterpoint to make it feel great?
Well, Ron, you are spot on. This is something that is scientifically proven to be felt by every new hire when they accept the job offer and you're celebrating. You're like, oh my gosh, they accepted the offer. We've got this new person. Woohoo, this is awesome. The minute they accept the offer, their brain floods with dopamine. They feel joy, euphoria, excitement. This is the job that's going to take me to the next level. This is the employer who's going to be the answer to my prayers. This is going to be an amazing stepping stone in my career. But almost immediately after the dopamine floods their brain, it starts to recede. And as it recedes, a clock starts to tick. And those feelings of joy and euphoria and excitement are replaced by feelings of fear and doubt and uncertainty. What if this isn't that great of a job? You know, I was interviewing with 3 other places and I got this offer and I tried to extend it as long as I could to see if maybe one of the other offers would come in so I could negotiate him against himself. But it got to the point where I had to accept the offer. Maybe I should have negotiated for a higher salary or more time off. Or, you know, now that I think about it, the people I interviewed with were from the HR department. They weren't the people I'm actually going to be working. I've met no one that's going to actually be my coworker. Was this even a good idea?
Okay, Joey, you're freaking me
out
out now. I don't even want to run the company more. No,
right? I mean, here's the crazy thing. We scientifically know every new hire is going to have those emotions. And yet, what do most businesses do? Oh, Ron, you've decided to come work for us. Great. We'd love to have you start in 2 weeks. Ron says, okay, that'd be great. We say, great. We're going to start on July 10th, whatever the date is. And then you never hear from us again until we expect you to show up at 9 o'clock in the morning on July 10th. In that quiet zone, that dead zone of communication, the only voice in your head is your own voice telling you that you didn't make a good choice.
Story time.
So what can you do? Well, number one, acknowledge that every single employee is going to feel this. For most business owners, that revelation in and of itself is enough to make people go, oh my gosh, we are missing the boat. Number two, just communicate. In my 8-phase process, I call this phase the affirm phase. You want to affirm the choice they made to accept your job offer. And how do you affirm it? Well, you let them know that you're excited that they're going to be working there. You start to give them some preview of things that they can expect once they get on the job. My book, Never Lose an Employee Again, has over 50 case studies from all 7 continents. That's actually how I came to know. I knew Christy Harold at JAM based in Toronto before we wrote the book, and her company is one of the featured case studies. But one of the other featured case studies, specifically in this affirm phase, is Trek, the company that makes Trek bicycles.
Now,
yeah. Most people are like, oh, and by the way, these are like the type of bikes that people ride in the Tour de France. These are amazing world-class racing bikes. They also make bikes for average riders like you and I, right? And what Trek does is right after you've joined, about a day or two later, right after you've said, I accept the job offer, you're starting in 2 weeks, you get a package in the mail via FedEx. And why does it come via FedEx? Because I don't know about you, Ron. If something shows up at the house via FedEx, that's the package that's get opening first. And that's
Christmas.
Exactly. And you're like, oh my gosh, they cared enough to spend the extra money to have it come via FedEx. This is special. This is unique. You open the package up and inside is the Trek Culture Book. It's a beautiful cloth-bound book, hardcover book. It's probably, 150, 200 pages. In the book, it details all the bicycles they've ever made. They show pictures of all the different models. It tells the history of the company. It's got photos of the employees with testimonials about why they love looking there. There's a spread in the middle that details all 6,000 plus employees' names. And some of you are like, well, Joey, what if somebody quits? They reprint the book and redesign it every year. I mean, this is their commitment to their culture. But my favorite part of the book, Ron, is the 4-page spread at the end that are Trekisms. These are words and phrases and acronyms that you're going to hear on the job, and they list them out and define them. They define what they mean. They tell you what context you might hear it with. If there's a call and response type thing within the culture, they tell you what your response is going to be. So it's like giving someone a language guide before they go to a foreign country for the first time. You're learning the lingo. You're learning the phrases. So you understand the language when you show up, instead of sitting through your first 2 weeks of meeting going, they keep talking about these TPS reports. What's a TPS report? I don't want to look like an idiot and raise my hand and ask. So I'll just try to listen enough to figure it out. Why are we doing that? Let's make sure our people are ready to talk the talk from the first day.
Yeah, I love that. And then I had one of my very first podcast guests, Bill, I forget his last name. He talked, and he was just very progressive in the late 80s. And what they did is they would send the newsletter to the individual's home and incorporated their families. And so it reminds me of that, because when the FedEx goes, by the way, the kids are excited. Hey, what is it? Let's look at it. I mean, it really involves the family, who is also, by the way, telling stories, anxious, it's unknown. Was this the right decision for mom, dad? Like, and so, I love the fact that it gets there. It sets a tone, provides language, like you said. It's like going to a different country with new language. This will give you some guidance and some history on why we do things that we do. So I love that. Interesting. What else?
Well, Ron, you mentioned, the idea of getting the family involved. I couldn't agree more. I mean, when you hire a new person to join your team, you're also beginning a relationship with the people who are most important to them. And the reason I say that is there is going to come a time where you ask the employee to maybe stay late, to work a little harder, to, do something extra. I'm not saying you should do this, but I've been in business long enough to know there are going to be things that come up where we expect the employee to do something extra for the business at the sacrifice of their loved ones, whether that be a spouse, children, their parents, their friends, whoever it may be. And so one of the things that I think is important is to build connection with the people around the employee as well, because here's what we know is going to happen. On the very first day on the job, they're going to go home to their loved ones, whether, again, that's a spouse, their children, their parents, their roommate, whoever it is. And the very first question that person is going to ask them is, how was it? How was the first day? We know that question is going to be asked. What are we doing to make sure that that answer is remarkable? And what are we doing to build advocates within the family? One and the other case studies in the book comes from PepsiCo, right? International beverage brand, Pepsi. And their CEO was had a bunch of direct reporting to her. And she decided to start writing thank you notes to the parents of all of her top executives. And the thank you note went a little something like this. Hey, Ron works for us. He is doing an amazing job as the head of logistics for Kazakhstan. He's absolutely incredible. Blah, blah, blah. Thank you. You're the one who I know put in the time early on in his life to help create the kind of amazing man that I'm dealing with today. Thank you so much for your sacrifice. Thank you for your contribution. This is a Fortune 50 CEO sending a letter to the parents of a grown adult. Most of the adults were 40 plus years old, and they're sending this letter. So they had an interesting conversation. One of the guys who was responsible for Pepsi's distribution in India, the CEO of Pepsi relates this. He was talking to his parents, and he was saying, I don't really feel like I'm getting the respect I deserve. I'm not getting promoted the way I want to. And his mother said, why are you talking so poorly about my friend, the CEO, who had written her a thank you note? She's like, maybe it's that you're not doing a good enough job. We need to do that. And so now they've got not only an advocate, but a little bit of a prodder in the family saying, hey, this is what we do. That's not saying, mother. Right? I'm not saying you need to write thank you notes to the parents of all of your top employees. But here's the thing. As a parent, when someone says, my kid did something special, my kid looked out for someone else, my kid went above and beyond, it's what we hope for as parents. We hope that the work we're doing is actually having results out in the world when our kids interact with others.
I mean, you're right, but I would also add the point that you had said, which was, thank you for doing such a fantastic job. You're getting a pat on the back too,
Totally. Yeah. And these are things, by the way, let's look at the cost of that. That would be sitting down to write the note. It's a minute. The piece of paper, an envelope, and a stamp. You're at under $3.
Yeah.
And probably 15 minutes of effort. The hardest thing is going to be figuring out the mailing address. That's the hardest process here, is figuring out the mailing address if you're writing to the parents. But if you're writing to the spouse or you're writing to the kids, with my team, I'm a big fan of, we do gifts for the kids' birthdays for the people on my team. I send them birthday gifts. Why? Because when mommy or daddy is not able to give them all the attention they want because they're working on something for Uncle Joey, as I sometimes get referred to, right? Great. I want that kid to be like, Uncle Joey's the one who got us the Lego set. Uncle Joey's the one who got us the books. Uncle Joey's the one who did this.
You're not leaving Uncle Joey. No.
Exactly. Exactly. But it also, I think, sends a clear message that the employers that are going to be the employers of choice for the next 2 to 3 decades minimum, if not longer, are going to be the ones that acknowledge the importance of their employees' lives between 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. as much as they pay attention to their employees' lives between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. What I mean by that, obviously, is what is their family life like? What is their home life like? Now, some of the leaders listening are saying, Joey, that's not what I signed on for. Nobody ever did that for me when I was coming up. Well, guess what? You also didn't have the internet when you were coming up, but we still use that today. And if you said, well, I'm not going to use the internet because we didn't have it when I was coming up, you're not going to be in business very much longer.
But, it's changed, Joey, because it went from, look, the transaction of I pay you, everything else from 5 to 9 a.m. the next morning is called drama, and you leave that at the door. It used to be, people say, leave that at the door. I want to hear about it in here. To now it's the whole Joey, and what is helping you tick? What about, how do I help with your mental health, your physical health, your family? 100%. That's really shifted.
Well, and I also think not only, I think I agree with you that it is shifted, but I think it was flawed from the outset.
Yeah,
because
sure.
and I think you believe that too, Ron, obviously,
yes,
but that whole idea of like, oh, leave that at the door. Don't bring that drama to here. Well, wait a second. What if you want me to stay late? Do you expect me to stay late? Do you expect?
I agree. I think it was wrong from the beginning.
Yeah, and this is where, the hard truth to most employers out there listening is, you made the bed we're all sleeping in. We all made this decision as employers to try to pay the least amount possible, the least amount of vacation, the least amount of benefits we're legally required to give, whatever it may be. There are huge swaths of corporations that approached business that way that kind of wrecked it for all of us. I'm not saying any of us did that, but that failure to recognize that our employees have lives. And the thing that I always find fascinating. So let me get this right. You don't want to have to worry about your employees' lives between 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. But if they don't get a good night's sleep, they're not able to perform for you the next day. So you really should be worrying about their life, because that's their recharge time. And if their recharge scenario isn't working, you're in big trouble. Another case study in the book, my buddy John Rulin has a company called Giftology.
I know John.
And John's a great guy, amazing human, dear friend. The example I'm about to share, I want to warn everybody listening that it may make you want to quit your job and go work for John. So I just want to warn you in advance. John has 2 remarkable employee benefits.
And he's a good guy.
He's a great guy. He's a great guy. Employee benefit number 1, unlimited, paid for by the company, house cleaning. Here's how it works. You want to have your house cleaned? You pick the house cleaner. You pick when they come, how frequently they come. You pay for it, you submit that receipt, and it is reimbursed that week. No questions asked. Why? Because he wanted to eliminate any of his team thinking about, when am I going to have time to vacuum? When am I going to have time to dust? How am I going to get all the dishes done and the laundry folded? He's like, just outsource that, because I want you to be focused on this. So by the way, half the people listening, driving on their commute, working out right now, listening, are going, oh my gosh, I want that benefit from my employer. And some of you as leaders are saying, I want that benefit as the CEO. I wish I had that benefit. Okay. Benefit number 2, unlimited babysitting. Same model. You pick the sitter, you pick when they come, how often they come, you pay them, and then you submit for reimbursement. Wow. So you can go on dates with your significant other.
Love it.
Here's the beautiful thing about both of these. I talked to John about it, and I was like, John, why do you make them pay for it? Why do you make them pay for it and then you reimburse? He said, Joey, great question. He said, in the beginning, we just upped everybody's salaries. We said, hey, we're going to give you $500 a month to put towards house cleaning. We're going to give you $500 a month to put towards babysitting. And they weren't putting it towards those things. They'd put it towards credit card debt or the car payment or buying shoes for the kids, 100%. Whatever it may be. He said, by doing this, we guaranteed that the benefit we want them to have in their life, the clean house, the time with their loved ones because they've got a babysitter built in, it actually happens.
Yeah. Yeah, he's right. He's absolutely right. That is fantastic. I love that. And so the other side of that, and I think you were talking about this, is the small things that people really hold on to, because they went from probably having, in some cases, a decent experience, being comfortable anyways with the environment that they're in, to like, where do I park? Oh, sorry. Do I like, what's my, the smallest little question, where do I put my lunch? Do people put their lunch in here? These small little things, which aren't going to change someone's overall experience, but they will hang on to from a remorse perspective. What are your thoughts?
100%. And in fact, let me share a story about our mutual friend, Christy Harold, and what they do at Jam. So when you show up for the first day on the job at Jam, you pull into the parking lot at about 10 o'clock. Why? Well, they have all new hires start an hour later than everybody else, so everybody's already there. You pull into your a parking lot and you get a spot, and your manager comes walking up to your car. Why? Because they don't want you to have to walk into the building and talk to the receptionist and have that awkward, am I in the right place? Am I having the right conversation? Do. They want you to feel welcome to guys. So the managers, oh, Ron, super excited to have you here today. Let's go ahead and head in. And they walk you to the front door. And as they open the front door, you hear music playing. And the music you hear playing is your walk-on song, your favorite jams. And how do they know this? Well, as part of the application process, they ask on the application, if you were a professional athlete and you had your walk-on music, what song would they play?
Ooh,
and then they never ask you about it again, Ron. You forget that you've told them. And here you are walking in weeks, maybe a month later, and you're like, oh my gosh, these are my tunes. You're feeling it. You're jamming. You're excited.
Wow.
You're around the corner and there is a tunnel of Jam employees lined up. It's a high five tunnel. And they're all high-fiving you as you walk in. And, oh, Ron, we're so excited to have you here. They all know your name. They're high-fiving you. They're cheering your presence. They're all wearing one of two articles of clothing, either a Jam hockey sweater, which for those who don't play hockey is like a hockey jersey that has the company logo on the front, their name on the back, and the number is the year they started at the company.
Oh, cool.
Or they're wearing their rookie hoodie, which is a sweatshirt, which again has the logo, their name on it. And you wear your rookie hoodie for the first year on the job. And then on your 1-year anniversary, there's a presentation ceremony where you get your hockey jersey, right? And everybody's super excited. So you're going through the high five tunnel. They're playing your Jam music. You have been inside the building for under 2 minutes, and this is the best day of your life.
That story is
never
gone.
felt this honor, right?
Tell it.
I mean, it's unbelievable. You walk into the conference room, and on all the TVs around the conference room are all the Jam employees who work remotely. They all zoom in to virtually welcome. So anybody who's got remote employees, you can involve them too. They all pop in and everyone's surprised. They have some conversations. You meet with the CEO. They do fun little questions. You get your rookie hoodie presented to you there right on your first day. And then everyone wears these for team meetings, for big team outings, that kind of thing going forward. You've been in the building less than 5 minutes. You feel valued. You feel appreciated. You feel seen. And by the way, when we talked earlier, when they go home that night and their loved one says, how was your first day on the job? That's the story they're going to tell. You've given them a story to tell that is remarkable, that is memorable, and is high energy, that sets the tone for what the rest of the relationship can and should be.
No, fantastic. And you're right. It is the story. Then there's a story. And that will start with, you won't believe it. Like you won't believe
exactly.
it.
Exactly. You won't believe what just happened.
Oh, that is fantastic. That's fantastic. So let's keep going through what's next in the process. I know you've got a process that you feel is a recipe for success, correct?
Yeah. So let me rewind briefly, just to give a quick overview of the 8 phases, because that way people provide some contextualization. The first phase is the assess phase. This is when a prospective employee is trying to decide whether or not they want to come work for you. They're looking at your job listing or your one ad. They're on the careers page on your website. They might be going on LinkedIn to see who they know is already working for your organization and who they might be connected to. They're going through your interview process, your application process. They're going through the steps to be considered as an employee. We then come to phase 2. The accept phase. In the accept phase, we as the employer accept that this is the candidate we want. We extend a job offer, and if we're lucky, that candidate accepts the job offer. But almost immediately after that, they go into that New hires remorse, we talked about earlier, that affirm phase. That's phase 3. They then show up for the first day on the job. The first day on the job is day 4. That's the activate phase, where we want to energize the relationship. That's the jam story I just told you about. You want to make that first day so remarkable that, in the immortal words of country music legend Bonnie Raitt, you give them something to talk about, right? That's the goal. Give them something to talk about. But then we come to phase 5. And I will tell you, Ron, this is where most businesses start to fall apart. Phase 5 is the acclimate phase. The acclimate phase lasts for weeks or even months. It begins with the second official day on the job and continues on as that new hire gets used to your way of doing business, their role, their responsibilities, the requirements of the job, the different relationships they're required to maintain. We have a tendency as employers to fire hose our people. We try to teach them everything they need to know in a day or 2 days. And then we push them into the deep end of the pool and say, well, just swim and we'll figure it out. We make our own problems. If the people listening did nothing other than to take the training you currently do on the first or second day on the job for your people and break it up to run for a month, don't add anything new. Just take the same amount of stuff you're doing, but teach it slower. Give them time to digest. Break it out across time. That alone will dramatically increase your employee retention and engagement.
So, Joey, on that note, I just want to tell you a story of where we got that wrong, and I believe we're now moving to get it right. So in our business Vita, our building ambassadors, we have Vita University, and we used to really say, "Hey, Joey, we'd onboard you, and then you go through Vita University, and we would." Mandate's a strong word, but we'd encourage you to finish all these modules in 30 days. Way too much. You're not learning in the flow. You're learning something that you're going to not have to deal with for 8 months. I mean, what a waste of time. We have now gone back, worked with that position to say, what is the flow? What is your journey like? Because in some cases, and what's most important, and what are the things that are going to happen to you day one? We need to deal with that, And so we've really tried to pivot it to choose your own adventure-ish. And what I mean by that is, there'll be a part of that that'll say, hey, Joey, look, at this point, stop, go meet some team members and have a coffee with them, and then come back once you've done that. So we're trying to make this more scavenger hunt, not choose your own adventure. Choose your adventure would be phase 2 of that, where there'd be open modules, say, don't even do it until you need to deal with it. Like, I'm cooking something tonight, I'm going to Google the recipe to figure it out. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
100%. And I love this, Ron. And I say this from a place of love and respect. Many organizations have something like a Vita University. What I find fascinating is you decided to call it university, but then you implied that you should be able to get your degree in 30 days. Like, can you imagine a university saying, hey, come to our university and we're going to give you your diploma at the end of 30 days? People would be like, this is worthless. I'm not going to really get a good education here. This is a paper mill. They're just churning and burning. What are you doing? It's like, no, if I love the idea of calling it a university or college, well, then make it a curriculum. Make it a curriculum that builds on itself. And by the way, this speaks to some of the future phases. So we come out of that acclimate phase and we come to phase 6, the accomplish phase. This is when the employee achieves the goal they had when they originally decided to accept the job offer. And pro tip here, the goal is not a paycheck. The goal is new skill sets, new responsibilities, managing a team for the first time, being part of a culture that they think is amazing. Whatever they're trying to accomplish as their leader, as their employer, we need to be tracking that and celebrating with them when they accomplish it. But then we come to phase 7, the adopt phase. And this ties right back to that university conversation. The adopt phase is when the employee becomes loyal to you and only you. They're all bought in. They're constantly growing and learning. They're constantly contributing. When we think about a university mindset, I went to the University of Notre Dame. When you come in as a freshman, there's all this fanfare and all this excitement. And the whole idea is by the time you leave 4 years later as a senior, you have bought in to this alumni network. You've bought into the pride for this school. You've bought into the pageantry that's associated so that you are an adopter and a fan going forward. And if we're really lucky, you are what is the 8th phase in Joey's 8-phase journey, an advocate. And if you're an advocate, you are singing the praises far and wide. You're recruiting other people to come be fans, other people to come join the organization. You're giving testimonials. There's an open position in the job in the organization. You're recruiting the best people you ever knew to come apply for the position because you want to work with other top amazing people that you know. The challenge most businesses face is they spend time trying to find a candidate, and they say they're trying to find the best possible candidate, but usually it's the candidate of the people that actually took the time to apply that they're going to try to do their best to pick one. Then they want to onboard them in a matter of days instead of weeks or months, and sometimes even just hours. And then they expect them to be a long-term top performer over the course of many years. When we step back and look at it that way, I think most business leaders would say those are foolish expectations. We should not be expecting those results from the pathetic approach and system and process we have set up. So we have an opportunity to slow down a little, think intentionally, think strategically about where this new hire is in the journey, and what are we doing, to your point earlier, to give them the tools they need to succeed every step along the way.
And I would assume, because when I think about this, I do think that there are consistent messaging that should happen, but I also think that this training, onboarding, and let's say it's onboarding be the softer stuff and training being the job training, but I think it's not one size fits all. I'm curious what your thoughts on that are. When I think about that, I think of risk and low risk and high risk. So for instance, someone who's joined the company that is punching in accounts payable may be low risk versus a chief operating officer who has major influence in the organization. And so we would view those in the onboarding process a little differently. What are your thoughts? And then I'll walk you through kind of some strategies.
What I think is interesting, Ron, and I'd be curious as to how you do it, but I think many organizations don't properly assess the risk. I don't disagree with you that there are different risk profiles and different levels, but I think many leaders misassign the actual risk. In many organizations, the C-suite people that are joining receive less training and onboarding than the most junior people. And yet these are going to be your leaders. These are your voices. These are the people that have to do it. It's like
influential.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, but they've been a CFO before. They'll be fine being a CFO here. It's like, no. That person needs to sit through the history of the company. That person needs to sit through the messaging. That person should probably spend some time on the phone dealing with customers and getting a feel for what are the actual issues here instead of, I know how to be a CFO. I know what my numbers are. And I'm not bagging on the CFOs. This happens in every position. I also think it's the case that everyone in the organization should have at least the same foundation for conversations. The Trekisms, the culture book that Trek sends, gets sent to every employee, regardless of their role. Why? Because everyone needs to know our history. Everyone needs to know our philosophy. Everyone needs to be bought into what we're doing. Not to mention, that creates a common vernacular or a common language that you can then use cross-departmentally.
Right.
I grew up as a farm kid in Iowa. And if you go to any farm anywhere in the world, lots of times you will find a silo for grain, right? Silos are incredible on the farm. They are horrific in your business. And so many businesses are so siloed. The people that work in accounts receivable and accounts payable disdain the salespeople. Not only do they not know them, but they're like, you guys are constantly screwing stuff up. The people that are in, the sales team are like, well, you know what? We hand everything on a silver platter over to the accounts management team and to the customer service team, and they drop the ball and they don't like them. And it's like, we've got all this infighting that's occurring. And part of the reason for it occurring is because we didn't establish common goals. We didn't establish common vernacular. We didn't establish a common culture that we can all lean back on and lean regularly. Last thing I'll say on this is some CEOs, some leaders who are listening are saying, Joey, I don't have time to put this into my schedule. My schedule's already full. I do not have time to do all of this stuff you're suggesting. Okay, well then I can pull out a stopwatch and count how much longer your people are going to be with you.
That's
because
right.
There are other organizations that are putting in this time. However, I'll give you a little bit of an out. You don't have to be the one responsible for every element of your culture, but someone on your team, when they wake up in the morning and they get out of the shower and they're looking in the mirror while they brush their teeth, their sole thought needs to be, How can I make this the best place to work in my community, in my province, in my country, in my industry? Someone has to have that as the primary driver of their thought processes every single day if you want to be a world-class employer. If you don't want to be a world-class employer and have your choice of top talent, well, then yes, you don't need anyone to do that.
That's a great point. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I was going to go back to a risky hire. We recently brought on a chief operating officer, and the guidance was, look, her name's Jessie. Jessie, don't touch anything for 90 days. That was just guidance that started to say, just learn the business and get to know people. We'll structure that for you, so you're not just trying to figure it on your own. But of course, then the question was, well, like that's also stupid. Like, okay, I have 90 days. You let that person go. And so what we did was, it's the first time we did this, and I think it was a sound strategy. At the 40-day mark, something like that, we sat her down with leadership team, their peers, people that reported to her, and did a basically hour and a half, 2 hour interview of what do you know about the business? Let's not make any assumptions. Okay, because that'll tell us where you should even start. Where are your strongest relationships? Okay, start managing those people. We can start to transition that. What are the messages that I thought were clear but were not clear? Yeah, we had a few folks come back from West Point, and I love this communication upgrade. It's not about, the goal isn't to be understood. The goal is to ensure you're 100% not misunderstood. It was really strong. And so, what are your thoughts on that kind of onboarding and the check and balance?
I 100% agree with it. I think what you need to do is what all business leaders would benefit from is recognizing that every minute invested in the first 100 days of a new hire's experience compounds in interest and return on investment beyond the first 100 days. So you've got to put in the time in the beginning, and you've got to over-index in the beginning, and you've got to regularly check in and create an environment and a space and a level of trust and comfort where you can say, after 2 weeks, what are the things that you feel like you wish you knew more about? What are the things that aren't working as well? What are the things where you're like, gosh, I'm still feeling kind of blind over here? How can we support you with the resources, with the information, with the access, with the interactions that will help you to get up to speed quickly? The last chapter of my book is a case study of a single company where we look at what they do in all 8 phases. And the reason I decided to do this is doing the interviews. I interviewed a company that was so world-class in all 8 phases that I was like, I have to dissect their entire journey, not just one component part of it, like I did for all the case studies. The company is Lego. As in the company that makes Lego bricks, Lego toys that people play with, right? And what's fascinating about Lego is what they do for their senior executives, for like a COO position or a CFO. Lots of times when those type of people join an organization, there is a significant gap between the day they accept the offer and when they start. And lots of times with senior executives, it may be 2 months, 3 months, 5 months.
Oh, sorry. Gap in time.
A significant gap in time between when they accept the job and when they actually start in the job. I was talking to the chief people officer at Lego, and he was sharing how they had brought on a C-suite executive that from the time of accepting the offer to first day on the job was 7 months.
Wow.
So you might imagine my question was, well, what did you do during the 7 months? How do you keep this person engaged, excited, interesting? He said, I did weekly calls with this executive where I broke down all the financials, all the people challenges, all the logistical challenges, all of our visions for the next 2, 3, 5 years, all the stuff historically that we had tried and failed. My job was to make sure that when that new C-level exec started on day one, they had the contextualization to contribute to the conversation immediately.
Right. Contribute to the conversation. Great. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. And what's interesting about that is that required an unbelievable investment of time and effort by both parties, by the chief people officer and by this new hire executive coming in. And I get that some of the people listening, they're like, Joey, I don't have that amount of time for the floor worker that I just hired or that. I'm not saying you should. But what I am saying is the higher the risk of this being the wrong hire and causing chaos in your organization, the more you need to be willing to devote actual time and education and conversation to making sure that person is ready to contribute on day one.
Couldn't agree more. And so look, Joe, as we wrap, I'm curious, since the book's been out, it's been about a year, right?
Yes.
What's one thing, what's new that you're like, if I was going to rewrite this or update the book, this is new information. Give us some hot off the press. What do you got?
Ron, I got to tell you, number one, I love this question. Number two, I have done hundreds and hundreds of podcasts about this book. You are the first host that has asked me this question, and I'm so glad you did. So my good friend, Mike Michalowicz, had a book come out after my book came out that had a section in the book that I was like, oh my gosh, if I would have known that this thing existed, I would have included it in my book. So now I just refer everybody to his book. It's called All In by Mike Michalowicz. You just search on it on Amazon or wherever you like to get books for All In, Mike Michalowicz. And if you get in and you notice there's like a K, a W, an S, a K, and you can't spell the last name, you've got the right book. And what Mike talks about in this book is the personal operating manual. So this is something he does with everybody on his team. They write up a personal operating manual as if it were like a software manual for themselves. So let's say, Ron, you and I are coworkers. I might say in my personal operating manual, I love to be the best version of myself, and the best version of myself does not exist before 9 a.m. If you need me to come to a meeting before 9 a.m., know that it will not be the best version of myself. I will come, but it will not be the best version of myself. Additionally, I love communicating via phone calls, video calls. Those are my two favorites, and I'll do email. If you're texting me, it's just too many communication channels to manage. I can't handle text, so please don't do text. And you detail what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And then you share that with the people you work with. And now there's a common ground. There's an understanding. If you're all about text messages and I need to get your attention, I should send you a text message. But if you're like, no one text me ever, I don't want to do text messages, well, then why am I forcing you to communicate in a methodology and in a format that doesn't work for you? So what is beautiful about the personal operating manual is, number one, it requires all of us to get clear on how we actually operate. I sat down and wrote one of these for my team after I read Mike's plan. I was like, I'm not even sure actually how I do operate. The reason I was able to just roll off the 9 a.m. thing is because I really sat with it. And I was like, yeah, when I have meetings at like 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning with folks that are in other time zones, I'm just not the best version of myself. We should never do that. That's a bad idea.
And Joey, does he have guidance for here's the key things to guide someone along? So at least
he does have some guidance. Yeah. I would definitely encourage people to make it your own. That's the kicker. Like a personal, if we look at a personal operating manual for an iPhone, which by the way doesn't have one. Why? Because it's so intuitive. Mm-hmm. The reason the iPhone doesn't need a manual is because it's so intuitive. You go and buy a PC, no offense, I won't name any brand names, but a brand name PC, it comes with a 38-page guide and maybe some discs, and read this and do, and then you'll understand how it works. So you want to be as clear as possible. It does give you some guidance on what to do. And then I encourage you and have fun with this. With my team, we even took it further. We're like, my favorite way to spend the weekend is this. My favorite thing to do, if all of a sudden we said, guess what? We're closing at noon today. You have the afternoon off. What would you choose to do? My favorite way to be appreciated in the workplace is this. Do you like gifts? Do you like presents? Do you like words of affirmation? Do you like a pat on the back? Do you like to be celebrated in front of your peers? Or do you like a private message just to you?
Yeah, you could really here's the things that motivate me, that get me really jazzed. Yeah. Yes. Look, I love that. We're actually going through our head of people and culture was going through a bit of a deeper onboarding thing. We were back and forth saying, well, we're not going to do anything with that information because it was more, I'll call it more surface. I think this is a fantastic way to pivot into that. I love that. I think that's, and one thing that really jumped out at me is, when you're creating something, create something that doesn't require a manual. Fantastic, right?
Yes, exactly. And here's the thing. Does it require more work to create something that doesn't require a manual? You bet it does.
Yeah, be more thoughtful.
But will it be adopted faster? iPhone is the #1 selling phone on the planet. Here's the thing I love about the way Apple approaches their products. Take an iPad and hand it to any 3-year-old, and they can navigate it. It's intuitive. I was sitting years ago with my niece on my lap, and we were thumbing through a magazine. She was looking at the magazine, and there was a picture, and she took her finger and she tapped her finger twice on the picture. And at first it caught me off guard. I'm like, what is she doing? And then I thought, oh my gosh, she's trying to play the video that she thinks is underneath this photo. Why does it work that way? Because we intuitively have taught an entire generation. Use your fingers to expand a picture, double click to make it play, click on a word to hyperlink to get the definition. You know, years ago, my son was running around and he was counting. He was very young and he was like 13, 14, Alexa, Alexa, Alexa. And I was like, buddy, what are you doing? He's like, Daddy, well, when you don't know the answer to something, you ask Alexa, right? And I was like, oh my God, look at how this is working.
100%.
Yeah. And as we think about having multi-generational workforces, you have to be thinking outside of the generation of which you are a member, and both up and down, not just, oh, these young whippersnappers. No, I'm talking about people that are 10 years older than you that you might have on your team. Like, what is their worldview? And that's what I love about the personal operating manuals. Everybody can come and sit in the meeting, print out their manual, and then we pass them around and read them. And what you do is you ask questions. Some people are like, oh, well, how do I get people to operate on my manual? No, that's not the point of this exercise. The point of this exercise is for you to get curious about how the other people on your team operate. Because the more curious you are, the more you can communicate with them in a language they understand, the more successful and the more understood everyone's going to be. And to your point from West Point, you can avoid being misunderstood in your interactions.
And people need to be seen and heard. And this is what a great way to do that. You know, that's Joey. Fantastic. Really enjoyed this episode. Love the work you're doing. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. My man, this was fantastic.
Ron, it is my pleasure. Thanks to everybody who listened in. I hope you had as much fun listening as I did, sharing stories and hearing Ron's questions. I wish you all the best as you go out and create those remarkable experiences for your employees in the first 100 days and beyond.
For more information about Joey or his work, please follow him on LinkedIn or go to joeycoleman.com. To learn more about our books or our Scaling Culture Masterclass on how to build and sustain a resilient, high-performing team, please go to scalingculture.org. And lastly, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a comment and share the podcast with one of your friends or colleagues. We'll be back soon with another incredible guest.